Modern life. Between careers, kids, and health, it can be mayhem. That's why we're here. I'm Dr. Lisa Varghese-Kroll.
And I'm Dr. Lonray Falusi. We're physicians, moms, and longtime friends who break it all down for you. Wondering how to juggle all the balls and still stay sane? Looking for advice but don't want to be overwhelmed?
Curious about how to make the most out of life for your family but enjoy it at the same time? You're in the right place. Welcome to Health and Home with the Hippocratic hosts.
On this episode, we're giving you our very best book recommendations. Need some new titles to keep your kids occupied? Or need some new reads for your own nightstand? Or are you looking for resources to up your parenting game? We've got you covered.
Hey, Lonray.
Hey, Lisa.
How are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this episode because we are both big readers and have been very excited to dive into this topic.
Me too. Me too. Super excited.
You know, we've always wanted to nurture a love of books in our children because it's been such a big part of both of our lives. And particularly at this time, since we're all still walking through COVID-19 together, you might be quarantined at home and bouncing off the walls, or you might be an essential worker who has no free time but needs a way to unwind. Or you might be a parent who wants to use this unexpected time to learn a new skill or handle a new phase with your kids. So we're going to share with you our best book recommendations for children, for adults, and on parenting. And we just picked a few, by the way. The absence of a title on our list does not imply a lack of love for said title.
Right. It was hard, I think, to distill down just a few favorites in each category and to not include like Harry Potter 1 through 8.
Right, exactly. It really was challenging. And I think that based on our training and the recommendations of many respected people in our lives, we've really tried to curate this down. So,
Right.
And we also want to note that both physical books and ebooks are great. They're good for different situations. I love the feeling of a paper book in my hand, but I also love being able to fit 20,000 books into my 8-ounce Kindle. So first of all, we're talking about our favorite kids books. So if you are in the market for a great book for your kids or a great gift for a friend with kids, these are our top recs. Possibly my favorite children's book of all time is one that I did not read as a child, but my mother-in-law actually bought it for my daughter when we were expecting her brother. And it's called Bubble Trouble by Margaret Mahy. And the reason I absolutely love this book is because it is just an adorable story, the story of a little girl who blows a bubble that ends up lifting her baby brother away and up over the town. But the entire story is told in a very intricate rhyme. These are not, Jack and Jill went up the hill kind of rhymes. There are multi-syllabic words in these rhymes. It's an absolutely hilarious story, and it's great for parents to read. It's also great for older kids with a new sibling. It's a really ideal baby gift in that scenario. But my most favorite part of this book is the genius last line, which I cannot even reproduce here because it will make no sense if you haven't read the whole book. But just trust me on this, order the book, read it, and then savor the last line and come back and tell us what you thought.
I'm so intrigued. So I have a few favorites, and these are mostly, I think, my favorites to read to my kids. The first one is called P is for Potty, and it is exactly what you think it's about. It's a Sesame Street book, and it goes through Elmo hanging out with his cousin. The cousin's learning how to potty train. There is an accident in the book. But it's really honestly how I got my daughter potty trained, my 4-year-old. She was like kind of interested, but never really wanted to sit on the toilet for very long. And by the way, whenever she's old enough to listen to this podcast, she's going to hate me for talking about this. But the great thing about the book is that it has flaps, like several flaps in each page. So you can lift it up and see like what's behind the toilet roll or, what's inside the cabinet. So it lets them just kind of like sit and chill out and flip through a book and look into all the flaps as they're learning how to kind of just let their body do its thing on the potty. I actually bought like multiple copies for different bathrooms. We'd always have one within arm's reach.
That's how you know that it's a good book when you're buying
That's
multiple
right.
copies. My next fave is also one that helped with a difficult phase. And it's an old book. It's called Bread and Jam for Francis. Many of you may have heard of it by Russell Hoban. And I loved this book because it's a great story for picky eaters. It was surprisingly effective at making my own picky eater introspect. He took a look inward when years of parental nagging had zero impact. The Adventures of Francis really made him think about whether being picky was the smartest life choice.
That's very existential for a preschooler.
Francis is a picky badger whose parents cook a lot of very delicious foods, and Francis consistently refuses to eat any of them and just eats bread and jam. And by the end of the book, she really sees the error of her ways. She sees how much she's been missing out. And she changes, and it's just wonderful. I really felt like I kind of bought it as a last resort, ordered it online, and really didn't think it would make that much difference, but I was very surprised that it did. So that's why this goes on my list of
I love that.
recommendations.
Anything to help parents of picky eaters. So my next favorite is called Princess Hair. It was actually a gift given from a friend of mine to my daughter, and it's it's actually a really cute book. So every page has a different type of princess. So first of all princesses wear crowns, as you learn on page one, but they don't all have the same kind of hair. It's like the princesses with braids, the princesses with blowouts, the princesses with curls, and they all are like decked out, to the nines and like running around in their little princess castle and as happy as can be. So I think, it just like lets your kid love their hair no matter what style they were born with. And so important, especially for Black girls like my kids, but really relevant to all girls,
Yes.
all boys, like everyone, just like your hair, your looks, everyone looks different. So kind of just loving that and going with it. It's so cute.
Right. And not thinking you have to change.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, I love that. And my next rec is, the classic Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein.
This was one of my favorites growing up.
I
Yeah.
actually didn't read this as a kid, and I really missed out because as an adult, I'm so blown away by how clever his poems are, and how
Hmm.
much kids can enjoy them, even when the meaning may go over their heads. They're so cheeky. They're aimed at elementary aged kids, but they're fun for younger kids to hear just because they're so lyrical and so silly. And they're really fun for parents to read. So I just love the way his mind works. It's very
Hmm.
difficult to describe if you haven't read them, but I highly recommend that you go out and get this book because no matter what age you are, you'll crack up.
I love it. My older brother, actually, his sixth grade class, I never will forget this, did a whole play based on Where the Sidewalk
Oh,
Ends poems.
lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a few years younger than him, and so I think there are like poems I didn't fully understand myself. They probably didn't even understand all of them. But it was, yeah, so cute. So cute. Love the book. So my next favorite is actually two, but they're part of a series. One is Ada Twist, Scientist,
Oh, yes.
and yeah, and the other is Rosie Revere, Engineer. So these are stories about two girls who are actually both in the same class in school, and they each have their own adventure around science. It's all about girl power. It's all about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And also just like trying new things, even if there's a disappointment, and kind of like having that grit, picking yourself up and learning. Both girls have a lot of interest in like science, and one is like has all these science experiments she's trying it out at home, and her parents are like yelling at her, poor Ada. But then they realize that really like what's important is to try to nurture your child's interest. Rosie Revere tries to build a plane. I'll let you read it and see how that goes. But same kind of thing where like you try something and you get the support around it, and just reminds us that our kids can really do anything with the right support.
Right. And aren't those titles the best?
I know. I love it. I love it.
And then my last kids rec, as you know, I had to give a Canadian shout out. I have to recommend some of my favorite books of all time, actually, the Anne of Green Gables series by Ella Montgomery.
I should just say, by the way, Lisa is the most patriotic Canadian I've ever met. I've grown like to love Canada so much through Lisa.
Oh, that warms my heart. I feel the same way about
Yeah.
Nigeria. Sometimes I forget that I am actually not Nigerian. But anyway, yeah, especially as the parents of girls, I think it's often challenging to find books that have not only positive role models, but that promote really positive ideas and that you can feel safe letting your kids read. And this series absolutely ticks those boxes. So I really love the timeless nature of these books. They were written over 100 years ago, or rather, they take place over 100 years ago. They were written probably 90 years ago, but they're still remarkably funny for even for the year 2020, with great themes like caring for those around you, for your community, making it through tough times together. And in particular, at this time when we're all going through this pandemic together, it's the last book in the series that seems really poignant to me, because the last book, Rilla of Ingleside, talks about how the community survived World War One. And there's so many parallels to what we're experiencing now that I think that any young girl or boy would really enjoy reading this and knowing that, this too shall pass. As humans, we have gone through really terrible things before, and we've pulled together. And hopefully we can do that again.
Yeah, that's so great. It's nice to find like a book of fiction that also speaks to today's world that was written almost 100 years ago. That's pretty amazing. So my last favorite book is called Just Ask by Sonia Sotomayor. If that name sounds familiar, it's because she is a Supreme Court justice. So she actually was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, sometimes also called juvenile diabetes, when she was a child, and has grown up just with it as part of her, life, part of her identity, but also ran into situations where people didn't quite know what was going on with her, or someone would see her injecting insulin and would make assumptions about what she was doing. So she wrote this book to help kids understand and embrace others with differences, especially with medical conditions like diabetes and autism. There's a child in there who has Down syndrome, which really touched me because actually my younger daughter has Down syndrome. So I was like in tears as I'm like standing there, reading the book for the first time. But it's just so beautifully written, and the kids are all building a garden together, and they talk about how every plant in the garden has a different role, and it's just really like nicely laid out. Actually, this is a book that I read to my girls tonight before they went to bed, and it was just like a nice reminder of how much I love the book.
Yeah, I love the philosophy of that book. I mean, I think it's so wonderful that this generation of children is being raised with a little bit more awareness of that,
Oh yeah.
a little bit more of embracing differences rather
Hmm.
than kind of pointing fingers at them.
Yeah, and that's what she says. That's how the book is laid out. If you have questions, or if you're not sure what you're seeing, or not sure if how someone or why someone looks different or is acting differently, or just any of those things, then just ask. There's no people like to sometimes talk about what's going on with them and would prefer to be given the option at least to explain or describe what's going on rather than, yeah, being stared at or assumptions being made.
Right. And isn't that a great lesson for adults as well?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think we all people of all ages, yeah, need to learn this.
So now we move on to adult books, and same thing. We had a tough time whittling down this list,
Mhm.
but we'll start with one of my favorite contemporary books of all time. And if you're friends with me in real life, I'm sure I have
Mhm.
tried to shove this book down your throat. But it is The Likeness by Tana French, who has become one of my favorite authors since I first discovered her a few years ago. She is an Irish American author. She's, in my opinion, one of the best current authors out there. Just she has such a gift for atmospheric lyrical writing, and she writes these very moody mysteries that in the end are not even really about who done it, but are more about why they done it, which I love. And she it is technically a series, but what she does is she takes a minor character from the first book, makes them the star of the second book, takes a minor character from the second book, makes them the protagonist of the third book. And that's how it goes. So they're all very loosely connected, but you could pick them up in any order. However, my favorite of all of them is The Likeness, and it's just briefly, it's about a police officer who finds out that a dead girl has been found that happens to look exactly like her and is carrying an ID with the same name that she once used undercover.
Dun dun dun.
So yeah, so that may sound a little more soap opera-y than it really is. It's actually just incredibly insightful and atmospheric. So I'd highly recommend it.
So yeah, Lisa actually got me into Tana French books, and I loved The Likeness. It was really hard to put down as you're just trying to analyze like what all these people are doing and what's going on, and definitely very mysterious until the very end. So I agree. I would highly recommend that one as well. So I have on the list the most recent book that I've read, which was Becoming by Michelle Obama. You may have heard of her. She was
Remind me.
she was first lady for a few years. I actually just really enjoyed reading it. It's written as though you're having a private conversation with her, but just reading about like her childhood and some of like the struggles and amazing opportunities that she had and as a young child and growing up. And there's such public figures, but there's so much about their private lives that I don't think that we were privy to. And just reading it, sort of seeing it in print was just so fascinating to me. So just very well written, and again, just like a little window into just very public personas in a way that I hadn't really thought about them before.
Right. And what a great example for girls as well, an
Hmm.
educated, thoughtful,
Hmm.
dignified woman. And, I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much.
Yeah, completely. So much respect.
My second recommendation is from another person that I respect. It's Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. All I can say is this man's a genius. He just gives the most fascinating takes on aspects of life that you never gave a second thought to. And in this book, in particular, his discussion of birth month effect is particularly interesting for parents. And this is where he talks about why the majority of NHL players are all born in January and February, and it's just fascinating because it really has to do with the school cutoff for your children where they live, and so what that means, and how that affects children's lives going on into adulthood is really fascinating. And that's just one chapter in this book. Every chapter picks out some crazy thing that you always just assumed was the way it was
Mhm.
for no reason, and does a deep dive into it. And I love that. I love the way his mind works.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell too. My next favorite is called Americana by Chimamanda Adichie. So it's a book about a young woman who is Nigerian, born and raised in Nigeria, comes to the United States for school and stays here for a while, and then has another adventure in Nigeria. The first half is actually my favorite when she is in the U.S. There is so much that I felt like I could relate to. Just the fact about the straddling two different cultures was so interesting, and like comments that people would make to this character, I would be like, wow, people definitely made those comments to me or asked those questions. So you can kind of see into the minds of your Nigerian friends if you read this book. But I think anyone can relate to this, especially if you're kind of trying to navigate between two different cultures, whether you're born here or not. I think it's definitely a very relatable book and written so cleverly. She's such a great reader and a great speaker. If you've ever seen any of her videos online, that highly recommend that book, Americana, with an H at the end.
And my next one is Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life by Amy Krauss Rosenthal. Now, I discovered this book maybe 15 years ago and had never heard of Amy Krauss Rosenthal. And after falling in love with this book, I kind of just thought of her as my own little secret until a couple of years ago, she became much more famous than she already was for her viral New York Times essay, You May Want to Marry My Husband, which was an essay that she wrote 10 days before she died at the age of 51, I think, of ovarian cancer, about how much she loved her husband and how she hoped that he would find someone else. And this book is just, was written long before she became sick and is just so unbelievably quirky. She's such a quirky writer, but very insightful, as many quirky people often turn out to be. And she just had a very original idea, which was to document her life in encyclopedia form. And it's a very quick read, but hilarious. And one example, I'll paraphrase, but under B, she had an entry for brother. And the entry reads something like, growing up with three sisters, my brother Joe was, I won't say how many years old, before he realized he didn't need to wrap the towel around his chest when he got out of the shower. And many more gems like that. It just really shows you what a unique mind she had. And it makes her New York Times essay all the more sad. But it's really just an amazing book on its own merits, and I'd highly recommend.
So my next favorite is called What the Eyes Don't See by Mona Hana Atisha. So she is actually a pediatrician who you may recognize her name as the activist who really spoke out during the Flint lead water crisis. She was seeing patients, seeing kids who were showing up with high lead levels. She had a friend who happened to know a little bit about this issue, and she kind of just took it on and was motivated to advocate for and with the people of Flint when the system was so unjust. The book is really cool. It starts out with her talking about her family and being growing up in an immigrant family, and how some of those values that she learned from her parents really instilled that desire to really like work with people who were again living in systems that just were not working well for them, and finding it just so incredibly inequitable that folks are being asked to drink water that had lead in it, and kids were going to have short-term and long-term issues with this, health effects, behavioral issues, brain development being affected by drinking water with lead in it, and it just was not right. So the book kind of chronicles what people, I think, saw publicly around her fight against having lead in the water, and but then also talks about like the positive things that come after, that the community rallies together for the kids, and creating new programs, making sure that they can try to mitigate some of the awful things that happen to them by their trusted elected leaders, and really doing their best to make better futures for those kids. So great book. She's also another great speaker, to look at some of her videos, and just anytime that you need to feel motivated to do anything, I think she's a great person to listen to.
I love her. I mean, God bless people who
Mhm.
advocate for the less powerful.
No
I'm so
kidding.
grateful. My last suggestion, I just had to put a lighthearted one out here. This is it's a book that you just don't stop laughing until you put it down.
Mhm.
And it's Hottest Heads of State, Volume 1, The American Presidents by JD and Kate Dobson. And they are an absolutely brilliant and hilarious married couple and former congressional staffers, I believe. And the whole thing it's really biting satire, but it's sneakily educational. It provides biographies on all of the presidents of the United States, with catch lines like "fall in love with Richard Nixon" all over again, and it's full of really useful advice. Things like how to win each president's hand in marriage, such as be his cousin, which actually turns out to be true for a surprising number of U.S. presidents. Did anybody know
Lightning.
that? So if you're interested in pursuing John Adams and you're his cousin, you're already 10 steps ahead. So that's your great news for today. But this book is just really lovely if you need an escape from the actual news.
Amazing. So I have a lighthearted one as well. So the backstory about this book is about 20 years ago, which is really scary to think of. I was applying to medical school, and flying around to different schools to do interviews. And on one trip, I was stuck at the airport. I forget why things were delayed, but there's, the like angry crowd of people just waiting to get on a plane. And I ended up having a couple of hours and didn't have a book with me. So I just walked through the airport, found one of those little, shops, and there was a book there with an interesting cover. It looked like a chalkboard. And on the cover, it said, "Me Talk Pretty One Day." So that caught my eye. It was by David Sedaris. I picked it up and took it back to, paid for it. Took it back to where I was sitting, waiting at the gate. And those were two of the funniest hours of my life. He just has such a funny way of writing. I just remember sitting there cracking up while, surrounded by like angry passengers. So it was such a nice distraction. So maybe I was loving it because it was, I wasn't thinking about my flight being delayed, but he is a hilarious writer. I think this was really his first book that really broke big, and he's written several others since. He's just a great like humorist. One of my favorite parts is just how he writes. It's sort of like dark, biting, kind of sarcastic humor. One of my favorite quotes was, "When asked, 'What do we need to learn this for?' Any high school teacher can confidently answer that regardless of the subject, the knowledge will come in handy once the student hits middle age and starts working on crossword puzzles in order to stave off the terrible loneliness." So it's just that pick me up that you need.
Oh man.
But such great, it's like largely autobiographical, and his family is hilarious. His sister's Amy Sedaris, who's an actress that's been on a couple of or several like comedy shows. But a great read, just if you need something lighthearted to make you smile and laugh.
My favorite kind.
Oh yes.
So now we move on to our favorite parenting books, and we have a couple that have really helped us both through some tough parenting stages. And my first suggestion is The Sleep Easy Solution by Jennifer Waldberger and Jill Spivak. And this is the one book out of countless sleep books that helped us with our reluctant sleepers. Both my children had a really tough time sleeping when they were very young babies. And, we were walking into walls. We were so exhausted and just desperate for some guidance to help them sleep, and, read tons of books in our bleary eyed state. But this was the one that worked. And it was this book that really drove home to my husband and I that sleep is a skill that needs to be taught. It's not an innate ability. And this
Hmm.
book gave us a program that really helped us be good teachers of sleep to our children. And, in a very small nutshell, the basic idea of the book is that you create a bedtime routine, you put the kids to bed awake, you do regular check-ins, and then you gradually increase the check-in intervals. And there's much more to it than that, but it was, I think, within 4 days of starting this program that both our kids finally slept through the night for the first time. So it was really just so empowering for us to see that something was finally working. And so I have bought this book for so many friends who are having babies. I really recommend it highly.
I love that. Yeah. I think that is my favorite sleep training method. And sleep training really is parent training, right? That's why these books are written for parents to read. So my favorite parenting book right now is Toddler 411. There are others in the series, but this one is written by Dr. Ari Brown and Denise Fields. And what I really like about it is that it covers so much around raising a toddler, which it can be such like a funny random time in their lives as they're like learning new things and cracking you up, but you're also like going gray or bald from pulling your hair out with them. So they go through just like everything. They talk about discipline. There's actually a primer on timeouts, and suggestions on how to avoid food struggles, like remembering that it's really about power, not about the food itself. It's also very positive, knowing how development happens in kids, what the milestones are, what the expectations should be for behavior at each age, how we can stimulate positive development in our kids. And they also cover medical issues like vaccines and the diseases that they protect us against. They talk about common infections, and there's even a section on poop, which, how often should kids be pooping? Is my child constipated? All of that. And I think you'd be surprised as a parent how much you talk about poop. I did not expect that before
So
I
true.
became a pediatrician or before I became a parent, but it's a constant topic of conversation, at least when I see patients and, try not to talk about it in social settings. But it's so, the book is great in that it just goes through so much that and it's a great like quick read too. So you just pull off your bookshelf and read that section on behavior and with some practical tips that you can actually try right then with your child.
I love that. Anything that you can consume in small snack-sized bites because that
Mhm.
may be all the time we have some days. So,
Right, especially with the toddler running around.
right.
Yeah.
So my last parenting book recommendation is the famous How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. And this book is famous for a reason. It's just full of, similar to Toddler 411, it's full of useful, pithy concepts that parents can immediately put to use. And it has sample scenarios and comics actually for almost every possible situation with advice for how parents should appropriately respond. So you can use it almost as a script until it becomes second nature. And it's just really effective for almost every child's personality. And I love that it's almost universally applicable.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. It's nice to have these books that cover a lot of different things and you can use them for a while.
Right, exactly. So, having given all these book recommendations, what if you just feel like you can't fit reading into your lifestyle? How do you kind of move pieces around so that you have some room for this? Because we really believe it's important, not only for your kids' learning and development, but also for your own relaxation and personal growth. So, for yourself, when it comes to yourself, we recommend starting with just 10 minutes a day, just a small bite of time whenever it fits best into your personal schedule. So that might be right before bed, which it is for me. I really look forward to having 10 or 15 minutes in bed before I go to sleep to read. Or during your commute, if you're not driving, but if
Mhm.
you are driving, that's what audiobooks are great for. Or as a screen break if you're eating lunch at your desk. For kids, we recommend instituting a block of quiet time or screen free time, either after school or before bedtime, and creating a cozy place in your home for each of them to curl up in and read. Because associating comfort with books can help solidify the reading habit. And it's always useful to use the same tactics with younger children, making reading part of a daily routine, letting the child choose at least one of the books that they're reading. Repetition is always a good thing for
Mhm.
reinforcement. Having a lot of books in your home to offer kids, that just so that they're surrounded by them physically. Whether that doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy a bunch of books, but going to the library, having your child have a library card or having access to your own. Used bookstores are a great source for very cheaply priced books. And, like I just mentioned, audiobooks are also a great option for you to listen to while you're doing something else, if that helps you fit it into your life more easily.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, if kids see their parents reading, I think that makes them more interested in reading as well.
Absolutely.
So now it's time for our physician mom life hack of the week. So I know that both Lisa and I were huge bookworms growing up. We love to read. But I know also, though, as a parent, especially, it's been hard to find the time to read as much as I really enjoy doing it. So I read tons on vacation. I really do enjoy that. So in those in between times, our hack of the week, or if you have plenty of time to read or make the time in your week to read, this could work well as well, which is kind of keeping a running list of books to read on your phone. So I use Goodreads, love that app. Others may use the Amazon app or just open up a note, on your phone. It's nice to have that on your phone electronic so that anytime that you hear about a book that sounds interesting or someone recommends a book to you, you can add it immediately to your list. So it's just less things, fewer things in your head and more that you can just put into your phone and pull it up when you need it just in time. So next time that you go to a library or go book shopping or someone wants to give you a gift, your list is right there. It's ready. So you'll never really be out of things to read. I think it also helps too when you want to give book recommendations or give book gifts to someone else, you can pull from that list, and maybe someone can read a book that you've been interested in, and they can kind of let you know how it goes and whether you should keep it on your list or not. But just a great way to keep that running list by using one of these apps.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's been so helpful for me personally. And it's also really nice because you can help support maybe
Mhm.
lesser known authors. If you've discovered one and you keep it on your list, and the next time you need to give a gift, you can purchase a copy or two from that author. Every copy sold helps, and so that's also just a way to give back to them and encourage them to keep on writing. So, thank you so much for joining us. We are really honored that you take any time out of your day to listen to us. We appreciate it so much. Please do follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where we're the Hippocratic Hosts. And if you have time, we would so appreciate you rating us on Apple Podcasts and leaving a written review. And please join us for our next episode when we're discussing vaccines. How close are we to a COVID-19 vaccine? What are the obstacles to bringing it to market? And how do childhood vaccines fit into the big picture? Join us next time.
Thanks for listening to Health at Home with the Hippocratic Hosts. Remember that all views expressed here are our own, not our employers, and all content is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice, nor the establishment of a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult your own physician or healthcare team for any medical issues.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate us, subscribe, and tell a friend. And check out our website at www.hippocratichosts.com for show notes on this and all our episodes. Can't wait to chat with you next time.